I stared down at the paper bag that sat before me, its greasy exterior coating the bag like it had been fished out of the local pond. The large yellow M staring back at me, beckoning me to open up its contents to indulge in its disgustingly overpriced and unhealthy cuisine. I didn't so much as open the bag, as I knew for a full-on fact that the meal inside of it wasn't what I had asked for. Now to clarify, I wasn't a spoiled kid that didn't get their third Happy Meal for the week, nor was I hoping for the most caloric menu item atop of greasy french fries and sugary sludge called soda to gulp it all down with. I simply asked for what I guess I could consider to be the most, quote-unquote, healthy meal that I could get. A simple grilled chicken sandwich with apple slices and water. Something simple from McDonald's. Nothing insane, but something that would be a bit of a step away from the god-awful grub that people usually tend to call that stuff food. Across from the table, from where I sat, was my mother. She was gnawing at her second helping of a double quarter pounder with cheese meal that she had bought for herself. She hungrily smashed bite after bite of that disgusting diabetes-laden food down her gullet like it was the last hamburger in hell. And I had to turn my head away from this god-awful sight that was in front of me, seeing those bits of spit-drenched bread mixed with the various condiments of ketchup, mayo, and mustard, followed by the chewed-up remnants of meat and curdled rotted cheese dripping from her jaw. From the sheer amount of bites that she was sloppily taking was enough to kill my appetite, if I even had one at all to begin with. My mother looked at me, her face still stuffed with a god-awful amount of food. Her face was contorted into a look of rage that was crafted onto her face like a skilled sculptor in stone. "Why the fuck are you not eating?" she snarled in between bites. "You didn't get me what I asked for, did you?" "I didn't ask for much. I don't want to eat any more of this garbage," I responded back, with a dry but assertive tone. My mother, not particularly liking the tone that I had used, got up from the table and then immediately went over towards me. I knew for a full-on fact what was coming at that instant. I knew for a full-on fact to not try and run. She might have been a relatively big woman at this point, but she could easily chase a person down and beat them hard. Within an instant, she balled her hands into fist and proceeded to smash the bag of food in front of me with a violent rage that would make even the most ill-tempered of people look upon in nothing but horror. After a minute of raging, she ripped open the bag and then proceeded to give me the hardest slap to my face, giving me a nasty welt on one of my cheeks before scrunching it into her grease-covered hands and pulling me close to her vile, rancid, unbrushed teeth. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch," she spat, sending particles of food onto my once clean face. "You're gonna eat every last bite of that McDonald's I got for you. I don't want to have to deal with CPS coming back over again like last time. Do you hear me? And I swear to God, if you don't eat every last bite in front of you, I swear to God, I'm gonna fucking beat you worse than I did last." I simply nodded, my expression never wavering from the dull look that I had on it from the very start of dinner. She let go of my face, and then went back to eat her disgusting meal, glaring at me the whole time as I attempted to eat what I assumed was a Big Mac and fries. It was all mashed up and vomit-inducing. Literally looked like somebody puked in my bag. Although honestly, eating it tasted the same. Although I've been eating this for nearly 2 years at this point, so I guess it doesn't make much of a difference, does it? After supper and my loud, angry beast of a mother screaming at me for the next 15 minutes about how much of an ungrateful brat I was, I made my way back to my room. As I did so, I walked past the room that was once the kitchen area of our apartment, a place that my mother, prior to her addiction to fast food, would cook delicious and wonderful meals that once brought the family together. Before what she was a lovely woman. She cared deeply about everybody, always had a bright smile on her face. She was wonderful, beautiful, and cared about every last one of us and wouldn't even consider being the kind of person that she was now. Unfortunately, like with everything else, those days were all in the past. The kitchen area was now reduced to a simple storage room, boxes and boxes of various unused items and the like, and now covered the kitchen area, with the exception of the sink and the refrigerator. The refrigerator primarily being the only thing that was technically accessible. It was filled with basically all the typical junk food you would expect, soda pop and other things, but it was primarily filled to the brim with food from various fast food joints. My mother had a problem. A disgusting problem. A god-awful, disgusting problem that not only cost my mother her job at the hospital, but was one of the many causes of my father ultimately leaving us, getting a divorce from her, taking my little brother with him, and never contacting either of us ever again. All because of her disgusting eating habits that she just couldn't control. Or at least she could have, but she chose not to. I guess I should probably sum it up a little bit better. A year ago, my mother had called up late one evening, saying that she was going to be a bit late coming home from work, and that she'd bring something home for dinner that night. This in and of its own self was a very rare treat for my father, brother, and I, given how my mom loved cooking and wouldn't even so much as look at a fast food joint while walking to her job. In her eyes, fast food was a gateway drug to overeating, addiction, and an early grave. Especially with all the health knowledge that she had, she knew this completely. Which I guess, thinking about it now, was rather ironic to say the least. She was someone that, despite her busy schedule, loved to cook and experiment with food from all around the world. From burgers and fries from New Jersey that she would prep up, from fancy fried fish and catfish and other delicious seafood from southern chefs all around the South, to fancy dishes from France, India, and the like. She would always go all out with her cooking. Everything she made was 100% homemade, from scratch, and rarely was anything packaged or processed unless it was specified in the cookbooks that she used. The multiple amount of cookbooks at this very day collecting dust that needed to be used. Needless to say, she was a wonderful woman who took pride in her work. She took pride in her food, she took pride in her family. Sadly, when she got home that night with McDonald's, given that that was the only place that had been opened at the time, and she ate that first Big Mac, she changed. You see, like with most addictions, it wasn't right on the spot that she became hooked. It was a gradual process. At first, it started to become simply a monthly treat, at least as she called it, and then it turned from once a month to twice a month, then 3 times a month, then once every week, to nearly every weekend, to 2-3 times a day, 4 times a day, to every day afterwards. She would always find herself experimenting with other fast food places and cooking less and less and less and less. Any fast food place or takeout that she could get, she got it. It didn't matter to her. Anything went. McDonald's, Wendy's, Carl's Jr., Jack in the Box, Pizza Hut, Domino's, Whataburger, if it was around, Burger King, anything. She would get as much food as she could get. At first, it was just a simple meal, nothing more than that, just a simple little meal. And then it just got worse and worse until the point that she kept buying big giant family boxes and meals and things like that. Not so much just for herself and all of us, but plenty enough to sit there and last for weeks and weeks on end. So much so that she began stockpiling in the fridge, and that's what we would take with us to lunch. It became a daily thing of this. 6 months of this. And counting. 6 months of this. Her behavior changed for the worst, and so did her health. In fact, it got so bad that my dad couldn't handle it anymore, and especially after a very god-awful and violent fight that the two had. He walked out one day with my brother, and I haven't seen either of them since. I guess that argument that they had must have been really bad, which wasn't really that uncommon, but it still killed me. After about a few months or so afterwards, she was fired from her job as a nurse, as because of her addiction getting worse and worse, she started stealing her co-workers' fast food that would bring any, and when one of them wound up finding out and threatened to report her, she pulled out a scalpel that she apparently had taken from one of the operating rooms and almost killed the guy. I shit you not. She nearly killed the guy over a fucking fast food sandwich. Yeah, she was sacked. And surprisingly enough, she was able to get unemployment for whatever fucking reason. And now, after so many years of this, she didn't so much as leave the house except to get her typical fast food fix. But there's more to the story. I mean, I can't really type out every ounce of it without nearly having a breakdown every time I think of it. It was fucking awful. It truly, truly was. I think the worst part of it all was that she forced me to join in on this habit of hers. Thankfully, I never really had a taste for fast food. In fact, I fucking hate it. So, it didn't really seem to work on me that much. And that didn't sit well with my mother, though. And just like today, her and I would often get into arguments about me eating, which half of the time I wouldn't even dare do so, or if I tried doing so, I'd probably throw it up afterwards. This wound up alerting a few teachers at my school one day that apparently I was much skinnier than a usual 14-year-old kid would normally be. CPS was called, and honestly, I thought that I was finally going to be free from all this mess. I thought that I was finally going to be away from all this, away from her, away from all that garbage that I was forced to eat. But for whatever reason, she managed it. She managed to pull some kind of act and flip it around and say how I was the problem. How I was the primary issue and why she bought so much, because supposedly in her mind, I had a really nasty eating disorder. She never specified, she just said it was an eating disorder. Apparently the McDonald's and other fast food she bought were my quote-unquote favorite foods that I used to enjoy so much before my problem, even though very rarely any of them were. And that she was doing nothing more but trying to be a good mother and help me in any way she could. Needless to say, it worked. I was forced to suffer the consequences of my teachers consistently sending me to the counselor's office nearly on a daily basis, primarily because of the eating disorder that she had convinced them was going on with me. As if that wasn't bad enough, she started getting violent towards me if I didn't eat anything. She would even keep me from school some days if the beatings she gave me were bad enough to actually leave some pretty nasty marks. So, to put it bluntly, I was stuck. I couldn't get any help from anyone. My father was out of the picture with my brother. My health was declining more and more with each and every meal. The police, whoever else that I could try and get involved with, would do nothing to help. I wanted a way out, and it seemed like that there wasn't a way out for me. At least that's what I thought. I guess whatever God out there heard me wind up taking pity on me, because a few days after that last incident, my mother had gotten a really bad case of food poisoning. It wasn't exactly too terrible, but it was definitely something that kept her in bed for a couple of days. She, of course, recovered, but then after a while, it got a little bit worse. And during those times, she would send me to the door whenever she ordered food from a delivery service on her app, on her phone. I took as much advantage of this as I possibly could. I would give her food and sit there and just pretend to care about her. And then, with the little money that I did have, I'd go to the store next to me and I'd buy whatever I could. I would sit there and even go out of my way and do chores for the next door neighbors living right next to our apartment complex to get more money so that way I could actually buy food. Good quality food. Or at least in my mind it was. It was awesome. I can't tell you how much I wanted to cry when I sat there and I ate those first 2 scrambled eggs that I personally made that wasn't sandwiched on a fucking McGriddle. After a while, though, my mom's health didn't improve much afterwards. It seemed as though that she just kept on getting sick. I mean, I guess it was all the food that she was eating, but she just kept on getting sicker and sicker with the more food that she ate. After a month of that tainted food, she was practically bedridden for days on end, barely even being able to move so much as her head. She was completely miserable, and despite me hating her as much as I did, I tried to do everything that I could for her, especially helping her out with getting the food that she loves so much. I even went out of my way and ordered it for her. I knew exactly what she wanted. One night, though, after I had got done cooking a nice home-cooked meal of spaghetti and meatballs that I had cooked myself, homemade I might add, my mom had a pretty nasty coughing fit. This was later heard with an excessive amount of vomiting. Now, at that point in time, I didn't really leave the kitchen to go and check up on her like I normally would do. To be fair, I didn't want to hear anything from her as she had been complaining so much about her stomach basically dissolving, at least in her mind, that is. To be fair, I didn't care anymore. I stopped caring. I had a lot more important things to do besides that, like cooking my meals. Well, after a minute, I heard the vomiting get more and more violent. And soon, I began hearing gurgling and panic shuffling for a few minutes. I just kept ignoring it. After about 5 minutes or so, everything went still. After I had gotten done eating, I went up to go check on her, only to see the entirety of the bed that she was lying in, and the carpeted floor, covered and soaked in half-digested fast food that she had eaten that day. The stinking bile soaking the sheets and blanket with chunks of what looked like meat resting next to her still body. I looked over at her face. It was frozen. Chunky yellow and green vomit slowly dribbling out from a heavy pool of large clumps of chunks of fast food, hamburgers, and the like that she had eaten throughout the day that filled her mouth like some kind of god-awful vomit-soaked sponge. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. She had choked on her own fast food-filled vomit. I, of course, wound up calling the hospital, who immediately sent an ambulance and some paramedics out to our apartment. Unfortunately, though, after they had attempted to try and revive her, she was later pronounced dead. Turns out that she had asphyxiated, which I guess wasn't much of a surprise. Shockingly enough, though, I was never really questioned about the whole ordeal, especially given a little bit of my history, I guess you can say, about the whole problems with my mom and me. I mean, granted, I was questioned a little bit, primarily just the basic information that I had to provide to the doctors, that is, medical information, things like that, and whether or not if she had insurance. Needless to say, the whole ordeal was dealt with within a week or so. My father wound up coming to see me for the first time, and we wound up arranging a simple funeral for her. She was cremated, and my father ultimately wound up taking the ashes and putting it into a mausoleum of sorts, right next to his grandparents, who had passed away a while back. Pretty nice gesture, I'm not gonna lie. But still, my father, realizing the whole situation that I had been forced to be put through, ultimately did everything that he could to make it up to me. He took me in, and life became so much better after that. I was able to actually eat a good meal every day. I stayed the fuck away from fast food. My father and I rekindled our relationship, and it's been strong, and it's been nothing but strong ever since then. My brother and I also have a relatively strong bond as well. We actually have a lot of special interest together. He's an artist, and I'm an artist. I'm an animator. We've done a lot of amazing things together. I will say, though, a part of me occasionally does feel guilty for not doing something more to help my mother during her addiction. Maybe if I had done something a little bit more, I might have been able to save her. But in the end, she was the one who ultimately decided to choose her fate. Although in retrospect, I guess I might have helped a little bit speeding up that process. It's kind of funny, actually. It's funny how just a few boxes of rat poison managed to do such a damn good job.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping, horror-driven, nightmarish, gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come